A few nights ago, I was doing research for my next video during a break at work, when all of a sudden I said, "Oh my God." I said it just like that, and I said it just as loud. Now, normally I would be embarrassed by something like that, but not that night, because I found it. I found the smoking gun that's going to prove that the Phaistos Disc is authentic, that it is Minoan, and that it's probably proto-Italic. That's the parent language of Latin, with a wrinkle. Now, a few months back when I was doing the video working through the Phaistos Disc, I was having trouble with some of the text on side B. Apparently, it was a parallel to one of the Minoan libation formulas that archaeologists had uncovered elsewhere, but there were some differences. That wrinkle, those differences, that's what's going to make this case. Let's jump into this. The two men ultimately responsible for this breakthrough are Gareth Allen Owens, pictured here, and his colleague John Coleman. Those two plausibly match the font on the Phaistos Disc with the linear script from other texts, and it's from Dr. Owens that I learned about the possible link between the Phaistos Disc and the Minoan libation formula. There are several surviving versions of the libation formula. We're going to look at IOZA2. It's got two lines, so it's 2.1 and 2.2. It's IO because that's a variant spelling of Mount Euctus on Crete, where it was discovered. Notice it's wrapped around the altar in a swirl. A lot of people think the Phaistos Disc is a forgery, or if it's authentic, it's not Minoan. Well, I've proven it's Minoan just by virtue of the fact that the only way I've been able to break this is assuming it's written in linear A. But also, it's a spiral. The Minoans loved writing in spirals. They wrote on the inside of cups, they wrote around ladles. They're the only people in the world who like to do this. Well, there is one solidly documented exception. Centuries later in central Italy, where we became the Romans. Let's look at that formula. Ataipewaya. I was so proud of my translation of this word in an earlier video, but I was wrong in a wonderful way. I've never been so happy to be wrong. I'll cover that near the end. Yadikitu, Mount Ditka. They call it Mount Euctus today, but then they call it Mount Ditka. Yasasarame. We can finish this word because we've seen it in other formulas. We're going to have some fun with Yasasarame. Unakanasi. See the U at the beginning? It's a stick hand holding a stylus. We can reconstruct this for the same reason. That's probably the Latin una canis, with the dog. You'll see why in just a second. Epinoma. I think that's related to the Greek ephi, power. They also start names with epi, ephi. It's literally bee name, like the bug. Sirute, the powerful name of Sirius. The te at the end is probably a Minoan suffix for of or belonging to. Sirius is the dog star, so Unakanazi. Tanarate Utinu. The T is exactly what you think it is, a booby. Dirty little dogs. I don't think this word is Minoan. I think it's a Hatti religious term, and it is the key to honest-to-God cracking of the Phaistos Disc. This is not a joke. And finally, Ida. That's the mother goddess. Mount Ditka is dedicated to Zeus and the father god. She had her own much bigger mountain directly west, Mount Ida. So with all these dogs running around, let's jump up here and have that fun with Yasasarame I promised you. I was shocked to discover that in the Vedas there is a Sarama, the bitch of Indra. Although only he can call her that. She's the divine bitch to us darlings. The funny thing about Sarama, people didn't always think she was a dog. I don't think she was the dog, but she had a dog. That's probably how things got mixed up. I think Sarama is an abbreviation for Yasasarama. I think this is way too much of a wild coincidence. Yasasarama isn't Latin or Hatti, it's Luvian, another Indo-European language. This one related to the Hittite language of the Hittite Empire in Turkey. Here's another portable altar. Until now I thought Sirius was the sun god's twin, but now I know who she is. She's his little doggy. I should have figured that out in the beginning. Here we see her skipping around her master, something you see all the time, here and there. From left to right on the bottom, we see they started a libation formula but never finished it. T, the end of a word. Yasasara, they left off the me. U, a stick hand holding a stylus. And so we have it, a 3,500-year-old oh crap moment. You heard of Crypto, Superman, Superdog? This is the original Crypto and Superman. Last year they had a storyline involving him that lasted several months. It ended just in time for my birthday. And look what heaven gave me for a present. the very image of our portable altar. Superman is the modern sun god, and DC Comics is well aware of that. The imagery here is unmistakable. Thor over in Marvel Comics is a thunder god, as you no doubt know. Both the thunder god and the sun god are going to loom large in this video, and on Minoan Crete, I think they were the same god. And this very week, the week of my breakthrough on the Phaistos Disc, Thor got a dog too. His name is Thori because Loki found him first, so he named him after himself and Thor. He's very different from Krypto, but I'd pay good money for their crossover team-up. Now let's move to the parallel text on the Phaistos Disc, side B, B17 through B26. Ipewaye, Al Nitino, Utinu, Nitino. This is the key. The red box means the word is marked on the Phaistos Disc, which you might be able to see on the left. That's probably because it's important, and that's excellent news. Al Nopa, Al DT. I think I know who this is now. She was a mystery to me on the video working through the Phaistos Disc. The word is also marked, which is also excellent news. I might be right. Zoal Nitino, a bigger version of Nitino and Utinu, and it's going to put my name in the history books because it's the key. Wapinadwa, the wa is going to be another key here. Chidiyute goes with the Wapinadwa, you'll see why. TDT, another red word, not quite sure what it is. Maybe another version of LDT, because next we have Tinariue, and once again, Zoal Nitino. Notice it's repeated. That makes it even more excellent. You'll see. Now, let's line up the two texts and bring in the Roman alphabet to make things easier. Marked words will be in red. Not everything is here. The yata that starts and the yasasarame unakanazi. So let's take them out, line everything up. The Ipiwaya and Ipiwaya are obviously related, but Ipiwaya is always something like Atai Ipiwaya in the other libation formulas. Believe it or not, that indifference with the Minoans will actually strengthen my case that this is an early form of Latin. Yadikitu and Auditi. Normally this is a place name in the formula. On the Phaistos Disc, I think she's a goddess. The mountain on this libation formula is dedicated to, well, Zeus. And a mountain can stand for the god very easily, like Washington can stand for the United States of America. So we have a god and a goddess lined up. And Auditi is going to be important. Ipinama and Wapinatwa. Again, almost certainly related. The very source that told me about the Zoal Nitino also clued me in on what that wa is too, I think. The Phaistos Disc is quoting somebody. The altar table is actually talking. That I got from a related source. Sirute and Tirute. One of the many things I learned from studying the Indo-European language and poetry is different sources can have different names for the same people and places. This is common among Indo-Europeans. There's a language of the gods, there's a language of the poets, there's a common language all the rest of us use. So Sirius's name might depend on who's talking about her. You see the same thing in the Bible. It's Abram, then Abraham. Sarai, then Sarah. Notice how the names are also very similar. FYI, the name Saria was very important on Minoan Crete. They might be connected. And once I'm done, you'll see that's not a ridiculous idea at all. Tanarate and Tinariue. And Utinu, Zoal Nitino. Tinariue, Zoal Nitino. Tanarate, Utinu. Factor in regionality and local dialects. Minoan Crete was never united. Factor in the certainty that spelling was not unified on the island. Take note of the obvious parallels. See how they stack up. Like history, it doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. Factor in the fact that there's no single libation formula. They're all different, although they do gravitate around a single source and purpose. Now for my big reveal. Zoal Nitino, Zoal Nitino. Zahanetana, Zahanetana. They're even repeated. This text is from the Hittite Empire. The Phaistos Disc is actually older, but these two civilizations existed at the same time. This word isn't Hittite, it is Hatti, and we have no idea who these people are. But Hatti then was like Latin in medieval Europe. It had a lot of religious influence, all the way over to Crete, apparently. The Hittites had conquered their capital of Hattusha to the north, and today we see them using a lot of Hatti terms and formulas. We know Hatti when we see it, we just don't know what it's saying. Now, on a meta note on this book, How to Kill a Dragon. I noticed with great satisfaction that of all the Indo-European language families, Italic speakers are the only ones who did not have an extensive oral tradition. The Celtic speakers, the Germanic speakers, the Greek speakers, and most famously the Iranian speakers in India and Iran all had these broad traditions. I would say that's because the Romans were the Minoans and they had a forgotten literary tradition. Well, not actually forgotten, we just forgot who wrote their stuff. The chamberlain says, "Open." The old woman says, "Whence come ye?" As follows the chamberlain, "We come from the holy place." As follows the old woman, "From what holy place?" As follows the chamberlain, "From the Zahanetana." As follows the old woman, "From what Zahanetana?" Now notice the Zahanetana is big time holy. This is going to come up big time later. As follows the chamberlain, "From the house of the sun god." As follows the old woman, "How is he, the sun god?" "His form is new, his breast is new, his manhood is new. His head is of iron, his teeth are those of a lion, his eyes are those of an eagle, and he sees like an eagle. All that of his in the spell, moreover, is new." Now, Auditi is an old woman. I actually found her before I found this text. Notice how this is dedicated to the sun god. Very important. And the sun god is renewed, which is probably exactly what happened at the palace at Knossos. That I will go into in a much bigger video 3 to 4 months from now. Now notice how we have quotation marks. How do we know they're quoting somebody? Hittite has a particle that indicates that. Wa. Thus I think that same particle is on the Phaistos Disc. It's quoting someone. Particles like this were big in the very earliest forms of the Indo-European language. They actually carried over from before the time it was even Indo-European. The Iliad and the Odyssey of Homer use a lot of particles. In fact, he goes crazy with them. And they're common in Hittite, but by Homer's time they were already on their way out the door because they were redundant. That was their last hurrah. Now, I also said the portable altar the libation formula was written on is talking, and the formula is what it's saying. Why do I say that? It's on another ritual about the sun god. The altar says, "For me, that is good," or "I like that." Okay? This is a fire altar. That's important because we had giant bonfires at our peak sanctuaries. So fire was important for both of our ceremonies. So now let's circle back around to the topic of the main ritual, the sun god. And this in turn is going to point us right back to the Phaistos Disc. So this ritual confirms that it is exactly what you think it is, a sun disk. Fire was important to my ancestors all the way up to the Roman Empire. I knew that from my research, but I didn't know what to make of it. In Rome, we had the sacred fire tended by the Vestal Virgins. As the Philistines, we were also known for fire. Philistine means people of the hearth. Now, here's something interesting about the Indo-European language. Once again, before it was even Indo-European, it was what was known as an active language. That means nouns were either active or passive. The example scholars like to use is body parts. Arms and legs and eyes, these were active. Internal organs, like the heart and the liver, were passive. Now there was an exception. Fire and water both had an active and a passive form. The English word fire and the Greek word pyre are the passive. But for the Vedic masters and for people speaking Sanskrit, they use the active form, Agni. Now you might know Agni as the Hindu god of fire, but properly understood, Agni is living fire, and he is all fire, the fire of the sun, the fire of the lightning, the fire of the hearth. Now, what is the Latin word for fire? Ignis. The Latin word for fire is the Latin version of Agni, because the Minoans, like the Vedic masters, worshiped the living fire, and the Romans used to be Minoan. Now, I believe Agni shows up on the Phaistos Disc. Let me show you how. The opening lines, side A, A1 through A6. Side B is a ritual. Side A is a hymn or a poem. Scholars could tell that from looking at it even if they could not read it. Equipariu, etuque, auditi, aup. Another important word right at the beginning. I think it's another woman. I talk about her in the video working through the Phaistos Disc. She's about to get a lot more interesting. Hang tight, I'll show you. There's auditi again from side B. Remember, she's part of what looks very much like the libation formula, which we used at the peak sanctuaries, where we had giant bonfires. That's about to matter. Iquenoa tu sa? Yes, the tu is a horse's ass. I have a feeling people had a lot more fun in the Bronze Age than they did in the later Iron Age with the Roman Empire. Horses' asses, boobies, altars that talk to you. I wonder if they ever got sassy. Don't forget Superman and crypto. Waditique? Wa something no. We don't know what that symbol is. I'll show you why in a second, but I think they only used it on Hatti words. I think it's a phoneme, a meaningful sound in a language that they didn't have and we don't either. A good example is the word night, which is spelled N-I-G-H-T, Night, and we want to spell it N-I-T-E. Well, English is a Germanic language and it's spelled the way we used to say it. The Germans still say Nacht. So let's break this down. Aditi is Aditi, the mother of fire in the Vedas, and of course, bonfires, the mother of Agni. Well, if she's the mother of fire, then you know she's an old woman, which takes us back to the Hittite text. And now that I'm confident this is the name, I think I can break down the opening words of this hymn. I went over this in my series working through the Phaistos Disc, where I showed this is probably the Bronze Age version of the Latin both and, both paieriu and etu, both watusa and waditi, whatever those are. Well, I've already put my hat in the ring on Paye, and it's Paye who shows up all over the Phaistos Disc, not paieriu or eque paieriu. That's just one of her forms. I think she's wisdom. And etu? Of course, this is right out of Shakespeare. Etu brute? More beautiful Latin. The hymn opens, both wisdom and you, aditi, au alpi, whatever that is. One more thing before moving on. This is something I talked about several times in my videos. Side B, B9 through B11. Zorai something dwa, tiatute, iranitu, which I think could translate as Zarathustra of the Iranian god. Zarathustra, of course, is the founder of the Zoroastrian religion of Iran. Notice it as an unknown syllable. Wouldn't it be amazing if this really were Zarathustra and he had a Hatti name, or maybe it's a Hatti religious title? Wouldn't that be another coup for me if it turned out to be true? But let's get back to the opening and back to Paye. I think she's wisdom, but even if this isn't the actual word wisdom, I know this is her. Here's how. Notice that paw symbol. That's a club. Why would they have a club? Well, this is a very special club. This is the original hammer of Thor, the Vajra. This discovery was the first fruit of my current research into the Indo-European language. Aditi was my next discovery, but it was the Hatti that forced my hand. So how does this symbol stand for that sound? Well, let's work this out. I knew right off the bat that there was something weird about the way we said P words. Some people thought we said pa, some people thought we said fa, more than once. And we see that here. Sa P ends, Sophia. And now that I know about proto-Italic phonology, which I think is Minoan phonology, I suspect we actually said fa. It's like a P, but with your lips slightly open. Fa. Just like Mount Fuji. This symbol can stand for both unvoiced bilabials, but it can also stand for voiced bilabials, or in this case, va. It's like a ba, which it can also stand for, but with your lips slightly open. Va. And that gets us right up next to that sound, which is a labial dental, or at least in English it is, va. Now, it sounds like I'm just making this up, but I'm not, because this isn't the only group of sounds that gets compressed together like this. In fact, I wouldn't call it a sound value, I would call it an address. I'll pull all this together at the very end. It's going to be amazing, believe me. But you don't have to, because I'm going to show you. And in a spectacular fashion, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you a warrior priest holding the Vajra, centuries later on Sardinia off the coast of Italy. A single day's journey from Rome in the Bronze Age, if you pushed it. But of course, we became the Romans. I call him the world's first warrior pope. Interesting story. When I first found this guy, I thought I'd found certain proof that the Phaistos Disc was authentic. But unfortunately, he was discovered 60 years before the disc was, so he could have been used as a model for a forgery. But now that we know the Phaistos Disc is authentic, we have a spectacular ideological and iconographical connection between the Romans and the Minoans, just like those spirals. And remember, Hercules had a club too, and he was the son of the sky father Zeus. So for those of you who are neo-pagans who like wearing the hammer of Thor, you should know that originally the Scandinavians wore the club of Hercules, or Donar's club. And they got it from the Germans, who in turn had gotten it from the Romans during their migration period, and the Romans were wearing this back in the 3rd century. So you got Thor's hammer from us. We know this is true. Now let's get back to that man on the right side. Except he doesn't look like a man, does he? He looks like an alien. He looks like the world's first gray. I wondered if that was an accident, or if I was trying to read something into it. Well, I might have been, but it's not an accident. The alienness is typical in Minoan iconography. They did this on purpose. This isn't a man, this is a god. Here we see him as a bug. Incidentally, we did not have a sun god. I think we had a trinity. And here you see two of the persons of our trinity here, Mother Earth and Father Sky. He's a male god in heaven, and he has a bow, which would make him a thunder god, because the arrows are lightning. Thus in the Vedas, he would be Indra. He also has a bow in the Bible, remember? He sets it in the sky as a promise to never destroy the world again with water. That bow is still around in the book of Revelations. And that Vajra belongs to him. He has it in his other hand right now, you can see it. The bulb at the top is the hallmark of that weapon, both in India and in the Mediterranean. Vajra is Sanskrit for both lightning and diamond. Notice the swirling energy bonding them together. Father is grounded in Mother, and Mother is fulfilled by Father. One thing to keep in mind, the Vedas typically speak of Indra and Agni as separate gods, but they also make it clear that Indra and Agni are actually the same god, just like lightning and the sun are lit by the same fire. Put those two together and it's a good bet that in the Minoan cosmology, the sun god and the thunder god are the same god. It might also be true for the Hittites, which I'll show you in a few moments. Here we see bugs, probably as messengers. Here's another alien and more bugs. This alienness shows up in the language of the Greeks, which I think is language they borrowed from us. One big surprise is the almost complete absence from Mycenaean seals of representation of a static divine epiphany. There is persuasive linguistic and textual evidence that the Mycenaean Greeks were influenced by Minoan notions of divine apparition in constructing their beliefs of what gods are and how they manifest themselves to human beings. They, and the later Greeks, used a word for deity, theos, constructed from a different Indo-European root than in other Indo-European cultures. Especially when used in compound words, the root thes conveys the peculiar sense of the eerily instantaneous presence of a supernatural force. Yet, unlike the Minoans, the Mycenaeans did not attempt to display this aspect of divinity pictorially. Now back to our imagery. What is a god doing? He's walking up to, he's reaching for something. In this case, the Vajra. We see his arrival and reaching in Minoan iconography, out towards the mother goddess. Here, on mainland Greece, we see him grabbing her by the wrist, a very erotic gesture. And here he is descending, and then reaching out in two different seals. This is how the Minoans invented the movable type you see on the Phaistos Disc. They had comic books, except instead of printed pages, they had stamps they might have passed around and you made your own comics in clay or even just mud. You can always find that. They also had series of images on their wall paintings, so it was all over the island. It's a short step from there to syllabary stamps. I believe the story that backs this specific imagery inspired a strange story in Exodus about the Israelites following a cloud of smoke and fire. That literary imagery in the image here on top is the axis mundi, the bond connecting heaven and earth. And I'm going to show you another Exodus story that will actually confirm that theory. Right before the end, I'm going to shock you. It's spectacular. Believe me. And by the way, this young God is the third person of the Trinity. I'll cover that in the future video. The young God is Father Sky descending to the earth to be renewed in the mother. He is the sun god incarnation of the thunder god. I have a hymn to describe that dynamic. The son is his own father. The father is his own mother. The seed descends from heaven. The harvest rises from the earth. And in the Philistine city of Gath, on the coast of modern-day Israel, archaeologists have uncovered that exact same dynamic. They hung phalluses over the altar, penises, straight out of Minoan Crete. And there's something about this goddess, something that's specifically Minoan, although maybe a little Hittite too. This is supposed to be about the storm god, but look who shows up. There came the fountain of the storm god. How is it made? From bottom to top, it is made of stone. It is coated with panthers protected, but its water flows from a pool. Let them protect him, the pebbles of the Labarnaki, and let him become the iron of the sun god. They make the fountain of the storm god. How is the fountain made? See, they have quotes because they have that wa particle there. It is made with copper. It is plastered with gypsum. It is coated with iron. The mother of the storm god came down for the second time, and she sat down on it. For the storm god, she is his mother. But for Labarna, she is his binding. The spell of the pebbles is finished. The sun god and the mother. The old woman again. And she's sitting, which is important because on Minoan Crete, we didn't just worship the goddess. We worship the goddess enthroned. On the left is a gold ring from a recent spectacular discovery of the grave of a Greek warrior on the mainland. It's the throne room of Knossos. You can see that very room today if you visit Crete, but there are no palm trees like you see here. But we know they were painted on the walls flanking the throne looking exactly like this because it's in the excavation photo. I don't know why they didn't put them there. Obviously they need to fix that. On the right is the mother mounted on a platform holding up the Axis Mundi, flanked by lions. This is the bond that unites heaven and earth. Her throne commands the earth's end of the axis. His throne commands heaven's end of the axis. Later, as the coastal Philistines, neighbor to the Israelites, they literally had figurines of the mother goddess as a chair. Archaeologists are mystified by this. I have no idea why they would be. Crete has always been at the top of the list for the homeland of Philistines. In northern Syria, we now know there was another kingdom likewise called Palestine or Wallenstein. They were big on columns, with bases flanked by two lions. It's also from there that we get the famous woman in the window motif we see all over the Levant at the time. That is obviously the Minoan mother goddess as well. They clearly obsessed over that imagery. It's not just in their palace architecture, it's also on their furniture. The column was also an important Minoan icon. It represented a spot where the divinity could appear. It shows up all over their iconography. Probably this is a Zoan need to know. The Philistines are the sea people, and the sea people are the Minoans. Now, everybody plays this little game where they suddenly act stupid when it comes to giving us credit for our accomplishments, but they're quick to judge when that judgment makes us look bad. This game is getting really old, and you better start giving us credit where we deserve it, because you obviously have a lot to learn. Now let's get back to that paille because we got a little bit more work ahead of us. This is the image of that which possesses and that which is possessed. In Minoan iconography, we see that with a god and a goddess. I immediately looked to the Indo-European Vedas over in India for guidance because when the Phaistos Disc was printed, we're about 100 years away from the very first Vedas. So we're still both in the old Indo-European religious matrix. And by the way, I think we are reacting to some of the ideas floating around that were eventually manifested in Hinduism. We were not only rejecting them, but we were providing an alternative. I'll show you why I think that and what we were doing instead in the main video that's coming up in a few months. Now, in the religious matrix, we have Indra, the king of the gods. We know for a fact he was worshipped in the Mediterranean at the time. He has shown up in religious texts in Turkey. And Shakti, she who is power. Shakti is on the left, Indra is on the right, just like she is in that icon. She is the lightning. Shakti is also Indra's shadow on earth. I think she is Indra and that these are the same god. I'll cover why I think that in that same main video in a few months. Each god is named after the other. She is Indrani, the queen of Indra. He is Shachivat, the possessor of Shakti. She is the only goddess after whom her husband is named, and her symbol is, drumroll please, the lion, just like the icon, and the elephant. This is India after all. The image on the Phaistos Disc is Shakti, she who is possessed by Indra. And I think it is through this Minoan paille, or faille, that she eventually became revealed as Sophia, the wisdom of God. I talked a lot about the Minoan Peak Sanctuary, and although we don't know a lot of what they did when they were there, we do have a good idea of what they looked like when they were still operational. This is a rhyton, a very expensive high-end gift always given to a man, obviously a man of high status. On this rhyton, we see the image of a peak sanctuary. Here are the famous horns of consecration. Wherever you see those, start looking for Minoans. The coastal Philistines also had them, although the orientation of the two horns are a little different. These are the agrimi. They are feral goats that are still alive and well on Crete. Feral means they're domesticated, but they've gone wild. They are, in fact, descendant from the very first goats ever domesticated, and they are the only ones left. All the others are extinct. The Aegean also has its own subspecies of house cat. They're super social, they don't catch the same diseases our house cats do, and they love water. And of course, if it's Minoans, we're going to have spirals. They love them some spirals. I don't know how anyone could have ever doubted the Phaistos Disc was Minoan. There's nothing happening right now, but that's about to change. Somebody is coming. At the heart of the Phaistos Disc is the Ka. It is in our name, Captor, the kernel out of which all of our personalities grow, the foundation on which they are built. I thought we'd borrowed this from the Egyptians, but it turns out we didn't need to. We already had the Ka in our Indo-European mythology. It is the Ka, the Hu, the secret name of the unknown God, Deus absconditus, the ground not just of our personalities, but of reality itself, even the gods. Ka. In the beginning rose Hiranyagarbha, born only Lord of all created beings. He fixed and holdeth this earth and heaven. What God shall we adore with our oblation? Giver of vital breath, of power and vigor, he whose commandments all the gods acknowledge, the Lord of death, whose shade is life immortal. What God shall we adore with our oblation? Who by his grandeur hath become so ruler of all the moving world that breathes and slumbers, he who is Lord of men and Lord of cattle. What God shall we adore with our oblation? Through his might, are these snow-covered mountains, and men call sea and Raza his possession. His arms are these, his are these heavenly regions. What God shall we adore with our oblation? By him the heavens are strong and earth is steadfast. By him light's realm and sky vault are supported. By him the regions in mid-air were measured. What God shall we adore with our oblation? To him, supported by his help, two armies embattled look while trembling in their spirit, when over them the risen sun is shining. What God shall we adore with our oblation? What time the mighty waters came, containing the universal germ, producing Agni, thence sprang the gods one spirit into being. What God shall we ignore with our oblation? He in his might surveyed the floods containing productive force and generating worship. He is the God of gods, and none beside him. What God shall we adore with our oblation? Ne'er may he harm us, who is earth's begetter, nor he whose laws are sure, the heaven's creator, he who brought forth the great and lucid waters. What God shall we adore with our oblation? Prajapati, thou only comprehendest all these created things, and none beside thee. Grant us our heart's desire when we invoke thee. May we have store of riches and possession. Meanwhile, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. Leading the flock beyond the wilderness, he came to the mountain of God, Horeb. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him as fire, flaming out of a bush. When he looked, although the bush was on fire, it was not being consumed. So Moses decided, let's turn aside and look at this remarkable sight. Why does the bush not burn up? When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to look, God called out to him from the bush, Moses, Moses. He answered, Here I am. God said, Do not come near. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I am the God of your father, he continued, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. So we have a flock, sheep or goats, right from the peak sanctuary, a mountain, flaming fire. We have a bush, remember the twig, God calling out. In the ceremony, we have a calling out. The place is holy. What above all things do we know about the Zehanetana? That it is holy. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? God answered, I will be with you, and this will be your sign that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will serve God at this mountain. But, said Moses to God, if I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What do I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Then he added, This is what you will tell the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God spoke further to Moses, This is what you will say to the Israelites. The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is my title for all generations. We have the who, we have the what, we are the I am who I am. Don't worry about it. Two more things. A little housekeeping, then a rendezvous with Agni, a little reminder that he is with us every moment. Because the Bible tells us so, even if we've been looking right past it. I need to update my translation of the libation formula. I was awfully proud of this. Atai pewaya, atai paeon. Actually, I was pretty smug about it. But in light of this Hittite discovery, I need to do an update. It's going to improve my translation dramatically. It's also going to dramatically strengthen my case that these people spoke an early form of Latin. Ipewaya, with or without the ata. It'll work just as well. Ipewaya or atipewaya. I don't believe that ta was fully pronounced. Don't worry, I'm not cooking the books. Scholars have already proven these people were very liberal with how they worked with this writing system. I'm bending it, but I'm not breaking it. This is the Latin aperito or adeperito. Second imperative, aperio, a command. The second imperative is chiefly used in laws, legal documents, and treaties, or in this case, entreaties to a deity. Perfect. Uncover, throw open, reveal. At the bottom, I have my old translation, and now I have a very gratifying update. Reveal, my lady, with the dog, the powerful name of Sirius, to pacify. And Yapaqua shows up in some of the old formulas. This is a magic spell. The talking altar is casting it. To know the true name of the deity is to control the deity, which is probably what the other name on the Phaistos Disc is about. Sirius was important in the Mediterranean. Every year they looked for her rise above the horizon with the sun, and they looked at her color. Because sometimes she was crypto, and sometimes she was thori, and when that happened, there would be no rain on Crete. So we did the best we could to stack the odds. Now I'm going to finish by talking about a very gratifying discovery that I made while I was exploring Indo-European poetic and epic tradition. One of the weak spots of my theory that the Minoans are Indo-Europeans is the fact that their linear A writing system seems ill-suited to the Indo-European language. And looking at it as a European with an alphabet, and thousands of years later, it seems crazy. Isn't it obvious that you need a B to mix and match with the other vowels and consonants? Not if you're coming at this from an oral tradition. Okay? And there are two things that I learned about orality while learning how to pronounce Sanskrit, which I'm still learning how to do. First, there is no consonant without a vowel. Vowels are unbound, but you need a vowel with a consonant for this to work. So the idea of a B freestanding is unthinkable. It's ba, be, boo, be, bo. Okay. Secondly, and every Brahmin knows this, and probably every oral tradition person knows this, every sound that you make in your mouth has a birthplace. It has a location that it comes from. So it's not unthinkable that they would develop a writing system whose symbols, some of them anyway, point not to sounds, but to addresses in the mouth. And that way, if you have a syllabary, and these things could really get out of control, you could compress that puppy down very nicely. And you can even make it very portable so that you can export it to other languages. And we did that on at least 3 different occasions. We did it twice for Greek speakers. Once for the Greeks living in Greece, and then another time for the Greeks living on the island of Cyprus. Before then, there were people living on Cyprus who did not speak Greek. We did it for them. I guarantee you there were Semitic speakers in modern-day Israel along the coast who used our writing system, and there were probably people along the west coast of Turkey who did as well. Also, let's think about what we were up to at the time, and a lot of this information is brand new. We've just discovered it like about 10 years ago. We knew we were spread out across the Cyclades, the islands between Greece and Crete. We were penetrating into Crete, probably had some colonies in Greece. It looks like we had a pretty major colony in northern Greece, the region today known as Thrace. I guarantee we were living around Phrygian Ida. I guarantee we named that mountain. We are almost certainly living in the city of Troy, although I don't think we founded it. And this is new, we dominated the Gulf of Izmir, known in antiquity as the Gulf of Smyrna. And we ran what is known now as the Anatolian Trade Network. Okay? Now, again, this is brand new, and we were already building walled settlements, very massive, very modern walled settlements. We needed a writing system. But we did not have the time, we did not have the logistics or the inclination or the social stratification necessary to maintain an army of scribes to keep up a crazy writing system like they have in Egypt and in Mesopotamia. So the linear A writing system perfectly fit our needs. And there was a very subtle and very gratifying theological payoff. And it can pay off for you if you let it. And I'm going to finish with that. We have the bilabials over here. Pa, ba, fa, va. The coronals, da, tha. The liquids, ra, la. The velars, ka, ga. And I think we like to play around with them. Those bottom 2 bilabials look strange because they are strange. In linguistic terms, they are marked. I think these proto-Italic speakers did that on purpose. This play, this moving around the different birthplaces of the sounds, embody the living fire, Agni. Every moment we had breath in our bodies, he was with us. When we scolded our daughters, when we laughed with our wives, when we were lecturing our sons, when we were warning our enemies, when we were negotiating with our partners. Agni was there, our dear father, the patron of our hearth. 25 centuries later, on the first Pentecost, God, as Agni, signaled his approval of our faithful service when he unveiled Christ's church to the world.